I love free-range chicken on a bed of organic baby spinach, but sometimes I want a big bag of Cheetos. Does that mean I can't drink wine? Well, not according to Mike Pierce, the wine director at the San Francisco restaurant Maverick. He believes in pairing food and wine, even when it comes to snack foods. And he's here today to talk to me about that and to take me through some fun and somewhat bizarre food and wine pairings. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, some wine geeks, connoisseurs, get almost apoplectic when it comes to food and wine pairing. They think it's bunk, it's just, pseudoscience, if you will, let alone pairing wine with snack foods. Why do you think that can work, Mike?
Well, I think snack foods present a really difficult challenge, and I think once you get people to taste some of these foods with the wrong wine and the bad taste leaves your mouth and the right wine, I think you make a believer out of them right away. So.
And do you think that the same principles of food and wine pairing that apply to, say, Cabernet and steak can apply to chips and champagne or whatever you have?
In a micro sense, the big thing that applies is more complementing than contrasting or synergy. The three pairing rule guidelines, but complementing is definitely a big part of it. The only other kind of fold here, which is much more subtle, is you tend to need to find much more off the beaten track, bizarre wines with different flavor profiles. And most of the wines fall into the no oak, low alcohol, high acid, not a ton of fruit category.
And what would be some examples of those?
A great example would be when I was pairing Cool Ranch Doritos, which was where this all began. Huge challenge. I tried probably 8 wines that I thought would go with it based on what we just talked about, the standard principles. And then happened upon a friend of mine's rosé, which sees about 14 months of lead contact, which really matched the whey and MSG taste of the Dorito. It was a rosé, so it went with a garlic and Mediterranean, like garlic onion flavors. And then it was slightly oxidized as well, so it just really handled the chip. It had a little fruit to it to cut the spice with the cayenne, and the oxidized umami nature really matched well with the cheddar, powdered cheddar. So once I had that pairing, I was able to break it down and figure out why it worked.
So is that powdered cheddar or the fake cheddar particularly hard to match with wine?
I have found that is the top 5, like kind of Achilles heel of this whole scenario of trying to pair junk food. And it happens with Cheetos, nacho cheese Doritos. They all kind of have that same. Because cheddar cheese, as you might have talked about in previous chats, I think is the hardest cheese to pair wine with in general. Then when you make it into a powder and really distill that flavor, it makes it even more difficult.
What is it about it? What's the content of cheddar cheese that makes it so hard with wine?
It is very palate coating. You need a really high acid. It's nutty, creamy, and really is palate coating. So you need something high acid that doesn't bounce off it. Cheddar cheese can make wine taste a little bitter and can kind of dominate the wine.
Okay, so that was your road to Damascus experience, those ranch Doritos. But why do you continue with pairing wine and junk food? What is it about it that draws you to it?
It's a cross intellectual journey for me because I think pairing cab and steak and port and chocolate, popcorn and champagne, those are classic pairings that are quite easy. And I always like to challenge my palate and challenge my sensibility, and I learn a lot from it. Once I find the right wine to go with it, then I go through the process of why is this working. And you learn a lot about the wine and a lot about food and wine pairing in general. And I started teaching seminars here years ago on junk food and wine pairing. And they became really popular. I folded in other ones of Chardonnay and Pinot and cheese and wine and port. But the junk food ones became really, really popular. And I vowed from the beginning I would never repeat a food. So there's your short answer right there, is that I made this vow, and now I've done 20 to 30 of these. And so it kind of led me to keep finding more and more foods to throw into the mix. And I really enjoy the challenge. And to be disclaimer, I don't even really eat junk food. I eat very healthy. So a lot of these foods I actually never had before because I was raised in a sugar-free household.
So you're rebelling finally, or whatever. But is there any snack that you've found that is just your Waterloo? You are still stumped on a wine to match with it.
No, no, and the ones that have given me the most problems were Flaming Hot Cheetos
Okay.
and
What did you pair with that?
Butterfinger. Butterfinger is one of those foods I've never had before, and when I chose that before tasting it, I was just kicking myself. I kept trying so many different wines to go with it. Eventually, strangely enough, a buttery Chardonnay went with it.
A buttery Chardonnay with the Butterfingers.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. And what did you do with the fiery Cheetos?
I ended up going with a Charmant, so tank fermented, so there was a little more fruit. Brut Rosé, which was dominated by Pinot Noir, and from Michigan, of all places.
Wow. So a sparkling wine from Michigan.
Sparkling wine from Michigan, that was a Brut Rosé, it was mostly Pinot, but I think the most important part was it wasn't Method Champenois. So it didn't have those fine-toned bubbles, so the fruit could come through more and cut the spice.
Okay. Well, wow, that's interesting. There's a whole science here.
Yeah.
Are there any wines that you don't think pair with junk food or snack foods? Like they're just kind of never really hit the mark.
Yeah, definitely. So the ones that don't pair with food and snacks are anything high alcohol, anything with lots of oak, anything that's lacking acidity, and tannic wines tend to not work. Yeah, I've never had a tannic wine actually work.
And what happens with tannic wines and junk food? What does that result in?
Well, tannins are proteins, and usually you match proteins with proteins. So a lot of the junk food that we eat, chips and candy bars and pizza, stuff, there's no protein there really to speak of. There's no meat and no texture. You don't really need a thick wine. Tannins also historically they're complete enemies to spice. Spice and tannins don't go together at all. In fact, they're one of the worst combinations ever. Tannins really accentuate spice, so if you're eating something spicy and you drink a tannic wine, it blows it up in your mouth.
Right, it's fire on fire, tannins and spice.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Mike, well, thank you for this sort of overview of your approach to wine and snack food pairing. We're going to come back next time and actually do some pairings with you. We're going to start off with the Breakfast of Champions. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.